When Disney announced a bunch of Marvel films and shows like Ironheart, I Am Groot, and Secret Invasion, they also trademarked Marvel Studios' Nomad, even though it wasn't officially announced. Speculation started flying. Maybe it's a new movie or a surprise Disney Plus show? The closest we've seen to Nomad in the MCU is Steve Rogers in Infinity War and its prelude. In the comics, Rogers only went by Nomad for a brief 4 issues before he returned to being Captain America, but in the MCU, he was a fugitive for 2 years. Some of this storyline was explored in the Avengers Infinity War Prelude comics, where Rogers, Romanoff, and Wilson go after a terrorist group smuggling Chitauri weapons into the US. But it's tough to believe this was all there was to Nomad's story. Even more so when Variety mentioned Chris Evans might return for a new MCU movie. Many thought it could be linked to Nomad, but then it was Deadpool and Wolverine. But now there is news that Nomad might still be happening, but without Chris Evans. So here's where it gets tricky. There have been a few versions of Nomad, but none as famous as the original. You've got Steve Rogers, the most well-known, Edward Furble, who didn't last long, Jack Monroe, a former sidekick who had some spotlight, Ricky Barnes, Bucky's alternate universe granddaughter, and Ian Rogers, who might be related to Zemo, though it's a bit complicated. Now, out of all these candidates, I think the Jack Monroe story is the best one. This is the only one besides Steve Rogers that I think is worth telling. Jack Monroe, born in Naugatuck, Connecticut, became an adventurer and partnered with William Burnside, who had taken on the identity of Captain America in the 1950s. Together, they fought crime as Bucky and Captain America until they were both put into suspended animation. Decades later, they were revived, but in a delusional state. The two, now disoriented, tried to kill the original Captain America and the Falcon. Eventually, they were captured and placed back in suspended animation. Later, Burnside was revived and manipulated by the psychologist Dr. Faustus, who brainwashed him into becoming the fascist Grand Director, leader of the National Force. Under Faustus's control, Burnside shot and seemingly killed his old partner, Bucky. Burnside and Faustus were eventually defeated by Captain America and Daredevil, and Burnside took his own life shortly after. It was later revealed that Dr. Faustus had loaded the gun with blanks when he made Burnside shoot Monroe, intending to use Monroe in a later scheme that never materialized. Afterward, Monroe was taken into SHIELD custody where he was seemingly cured of his psychotic symptoms. He later sought out Steve Rogers and, donning a Bucky costume, helped him defeat the female terrorist Viper. Monroe was then given Rogers' former Nomad identity and became Nomad, fighting alongside Captain America to take down Viper. Nomad continued as Captain America's partner, facing off against the Sisters of Sin. As Bucky, he also had a psychological showdown with Baron Zemo. Monroe later helped Captain America defeat the Red Skull in a battle where the Red Skull seemingly died. After a successful solo mission where he captured the deranged Madcap, Nomad ended his partnership with Captain America. Nomad later got a new costume and teamed up with Captain America to battle the Slug, taking down his criminal empire. Monroe returned again when Steve Rogers was stripped of the Captain America identity by the Commission on Superhuman Activities. Rogers continued his superhero work under the name The Captain, wearing a black version of his costume, and traveled the country with a group of former partners, including Nomad, Demolition Man, and the Falcon. Nomad's then-girlfriend, a rookie adventurer called Vagabond, was also part of the group. During this storyline, Nomad was portrayed as a bit hot-headed and sarcastic, immediately disliking Demolition Man, especially due to his apparent attraction to Vagabond. Nomad battled Vibro and helped stop a faction of the Serpent Society led by the terrorist Viper from poisoning the Washington, D.C. water supply. However, during this mission, Nomad, Vagabond, and Demolition Man were captured by the Commission and thrown into prison. Sidewinder, a former Serpent Society leader, used his teleportation powers to break Diamondback out of jail and offered to free the others. Vagabond and Demolition Man refused, thinking it was wrong to escape, but Nomad decided to leave with Sidewinder and Diamondback, which ended his relationship with Vagabond. When the captain asked Nomad for help, he found him drunk at a bar. After learning that Rogers planned to turn himself in to the Commission, Nomad refused to help, and the two parted ways on bad terms. Going solo again, Nomad waged a war against drug dealer Umberto Cefilios. Monroe eventually discarded his spandex costume and adopted the persona of an urban vigilante. He kidnapped an infant girl from her drug-addicted mother and named her Bucky. As he continued his crusade, the Commission on Superhuman Activities began to scrutinize him. The commission, working with the military, sent Steve Rogers, now back as Captain America, to subdue Nomad. In a firefight, Nomad defeated Cephalios, killing several drug dealers and government officials. Nomad then hit the road, tackling real-world issues that superheroes usually don't deal with, like AIDS, homelessness, and hate crimes. He spent some time in Los Angeles, where he became loosely connected with the Undergrounders, a network of people across the country who help each other in times of need. The Undergrounders gave him access to trusted babysitters for Bucky during dangerous missions. During this phase, Nomad softened his harsh, self-destructive personality, becoming more laid-back and compassionate. Later, Nomad realized both he and Bucky might be at risk for HIV, Bucky due to her biological mother, and Nomad due to medical care received from the Undergrounders. He had them both tested, though the results were never revealed. Nomad later teamed up with the Punisher and Daredevil to take on a coalition of criminal organizations. During the Infinity Crusade, he joined other superheroes in space but didn't have much involvement, and he and Forge were mostly seen hanging around. He did, however, confront an evil clone of Gambit. Around this time, Nomad also joined Doctor Strange's team to battle Lilin, a powerful ancient queen. While on the road, Nomad crossed paths with the Hate-Monger, Man-Thing, and even Bucky's mother, who had been brainwashed into becoming an assassin sent to kill him. The training for this assassination was done by Nomad's ongoing adversary, the Favor Broker. Nomad was eventually presumed dead after a confrontation with a Nazi militia from his hometown. His father had been a Nazi sympathizer during World War II. However, it was later revealed that he had been placed in suspended animation, and his body was replaced with that of an innocent bystander. Sometime later, Henry Gyrich revived Monroe and injected him with nanites that placed him under Gyrich's control, turning him into a new version of the Scourge of the Underworld. While Monroe remained conscious and aware of his actions, he couldn't resist Gyrich's orders and couldn't reveal his true identity or his servitude. As Scourge, Monroe battled the Thunderbolts, who eventually freed him from Gyrich's influence. After returning to his Nomad persona, Monroe began experiencing relapses into psychotic episodes and symptoms. During this time, he checked in on his former ward, Bucky, who had since been adopted. Tragically, Monroe was shot dead by a mysterious assailant as he left a bar. It was later revealed that the cyborg assassin Winter Soldier was the one who killed him. As for how powerful Jack Monroe was, well, his abilities were not beyond the human limit, but were superior to those of an Olympic athlete. His physical strength, endurance, reflexes, and agility were all enhanced, though his transformation into Nomad eventually took a toll on his mental health and contributed to a form of cancer, as he didn't undergo the Vita-Ray process like Steve Rogers. As Nomad, Monroe utilized 6-inch stun discs made from tool steel alloy, which he carried near his collarbones and used as throwing weapons. He was highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, having been personally trained by Captain America and was an expert marksman. Well, that's a wrap on Nomad's story. What do you think? Would you like to see Jack Monroe's version of Nomad explored in the MCU? Or are you more interested in another character taking on the mantle? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on all the latest superhero news. And we'll catch you in the next one.